Hello everyone, welcome to the episode 15 of SoLeadSaturday. The guest we have today, Dr. Thomas C. Redman. He is unique in lot more ways. He is known as the Data Doc. He is a president of Data Quality Solutions. He helps startups, multinationals, senior executives, chief data officers, and leaders deep buried in their organizations chart their courses to data-driven solutions and futures with special emphasis on data quality and analytics. His most important article, Data Credibility Problems, received Harvard Business Review in December 2013. He holds Ph.D. in statistics and 2 patents. Wow, he is truly leading the area he's passionate about. So let's hear his career journey. How did he find his passion and manage to be one of the leaders in the areas he's passionate about? So welcome, Tom, and thank you so much for being my guest on SoLeadSaturday podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me, Lisha. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And to start with, when I saw your profile or came across your profile, I saw that it is completely aligned to your passion. So how did you find your interest or passion towards the math and statistics?
Yeah, well, towards math and statistics, I mean, that was a long time ago. I suppose that I had a certain, knack for it as a child. And then at some point I became sort of interested in debunking things. I remember there was an advertisement on TV that went, 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed recommend sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum. And I mean, and it just struck me as odd. I mean, dentists couldn't possibly have that much interest in sugarless gum, right? So, how did they come up with that? And so, so I followed the road in statistics to try to develop a bunch of tools that I could actually look at things and evaluate claims a little bit more credibly. And by the way, I mean, that's not to say that 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed, don't recommend sugarless gum. I'm sure they figured out some way to make that statement true, but I mean, in the larger context, and so that's what led me into statistics.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting actually. And then what do you think that, one has to do once one person finds his passion or the interest in any of the areas? What steps have to take to pursue that passion further?
Yeah, I mean, that's really an interesting question. I mean, for me, look, bear in mind, I started as a statistician, and then I went off to Bell Labs, and my job at Bell Labs was to try to help get more bits through the telephone network. Mm-hmm. In those days, there was a big conversion from an analog network to a digital network, right? So, most of your listeners probably don't know what an analog network would look like, but nonetheless, and that's what I was studying. And what I learned was that most of the time the network performed really, really well, except when it didn't, right? And so I had this idea that maybe we could apply control charts to the running of the telephone network. And control charts were invented at AT&T, and they made enormous contributions, not just in AT&T factories, but in factories worldwide. And so I sought sponsorship for that idea, and I failed. I failed to get anybody interested in it. But then one day I got a call from somebody who said, well, Tom, I don't run the network, but I pay these access bills. They're about $20 billion a year. They were AT&T's single largest expense at the time, and it's a mess. Could we apply control charts there? And I said, well, gee, I have no idea. I mean, let's take a look. And so I guess the thing for me was I put myself in a position where good things could happen. And most of the things that happened weren't that good. People told me no, go away, right? But a couple of good things did, and so for me, and by the way, that has been a repeated theme in my career is the idea to, you know, kind of go out and look for new things
Mhm.
with a really open mind, and um, and get over failure, right? I mean, you know,
Mm.
it's easy to say, you know, don't be deterred by failure. I'm saying every time I failed, it hurt me deeply, and so I never, you know, I never could do that, but you know, there was sort of a sort of a persistence, and maybe it was sort of, you know, persistence long enough to get lucky, uh,
Mhm.
kind of thing. And so, you know, 2 or 3 times during my career, I've sort of, you know, tried to have open minds, tried to go out and look for things, tried to push, and not only not you know, not really have I obtained what I sought, but other good things happened as a result.
Yeah, so definitely, if I could have to take away from it, it is more over like be open minded and be persistent and always approach to the people. Actually, some people may help, some may not, but you don't have to give up whatever you
Yeah,
are passionate about.
yeah, that's exactly right. I think I read somewhere that, you know, like to an entrepreneur, right? You know,
Mhm.
as an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter if you fail 100 times; you
Mhm.
only have to succeed once, kind of thing. And so, you know, so I don't know that I could fail 100 times, but, you know, certainly 10. And so, you know, the way you said that is right. Have an open mind,
Yeah,
and be persistent.
yeah.
Right. And you know, and I think, you know, pretty much everyone concludes that those
Mhm.
are really important traits. One thing I think, by the way, is I don't think you can, at least for me, I could not discover my passion sort of
Mhm.
sitting in a room. Right.
Mhm.
I had to go out and experience things,
Mhm.
and see what happened. And so, look, I'm most passionate now about data quality. I'm more passionate about it than I am analytics. And the reason is I'm just, you know, everything today runs through data quality, right?
Yes.
You
Yes.
can't do good analytics
Yeah.
if you don't trust the data. And so so the point I'm making is I discovered that passion,
Mhm.
right? At no point in my life where I was saying, oh boy, I'm gonna wake up today and do, you know, data quality until well, the fellow at AT&T who had the problem with the billing had brought it to mind. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So
And then one other thing. I mean, let me just say this. I mean, so, you know, like I think the thing that is throughout my career has been so satisfying is the great people I've worked with. You know, nobody goes into data quality to, you know,
mm,
to make $1 billion, right? They go into data quality because they think it's the right thing to do for
mm,
their teams and their companies. And most of them, right, experience such joy when they, you know, when they solve a problem that, you know, sort of human dimension of things has been extremely important, you know, important for me, and not something I would have predicted when I was 20.
yeah. So yeah, this is definitely like a useful to know, like how one can take, find his passion and take the steps towards it. Moving towards your work experience, actually. So you worked for AT&T Bell Laboratories for data quality solutions for longer time. So would you like to share any kind of experience or the insights? What did you learn or anything interesting?
Well, yeah, let me. I mean, I can talk about that for days. So let me just. I mean, the once I got into data quality at AT&T, we set up what I mean, you can think of it as a lab, right, in Bell Laboratories. And for me, for I don't know, 7 or 8 years, I had the perfect job for me, which is one foot in these enormous AT&T problems. And I think at the time, AT&T created more data than anybody else, right? You know, Google and Facebook and others
Mm-hmm.
create more data today, but and so I had one foot in these enormous problems and the other foot in the lab. And, and there was this incredible synergy going back and forth. It's trying to figure out a lot of times AT&T led, and we had to figure out solutions to AT&T problems. And then some of the work in the lab was, well, why did that work? You know, what is the underlying principles or themes going on that will be replicable for the next problem? And so, you know, so that was very, very, you know, that was very fruitful for me. I mean, I just, you know, turned out to really thrive in that environment. And I managed to assemble a team of people who were just outstanding. And
Yeah.
now my last year at Bell Labs, so, you know, I was a middle manager kind of thing, and we'd had some, I guess you could say they were like, you know, $100 million a year successes. Kind of thing, and mostly those were, you know, due to people in the business units that we were working with, and man, that was so instructive and so much fun, and I mean, you know, a little vignette sort of at the end of that. I at one point had the opportunity to speak to the head of network, and he made this interesting comment. He said that. He said that he really appreciated the $100 million savings, but now he was better able to manage his department. And that was worth way more than $100 million a year to him. Right. And I mean, it really was interesting, you know, like the leverage, right. And, you know, so the ability to run things, I had not thought before about data quality in terms of the ability for a manager to run things, right? You know, and I mean, and it's sort of relevant today. We're trying to manage through the coronavirus, right? And we really need, you know, to be able to have the right data and trust that data. But anyway, I mean, so my last year at AT&T, it's, you know, I really went out on a sort of an evangelist mission to try to interest a lot of others in what we learned in the access management portion of the business. And once again, I was 0 for 10 or 12 or whatever it is. And I had good support. I mean, I had good support up the Bell Labs management chain. But anyway, so, you know, so at that time I decided, you know, maybe it was time for me to strike out on my own, and that's when I set up this company, on, you know, data quality solutions, and so now, and so, you know, we started about the same time Google did, and Google's been a little bit more successful than us, but you know, we've been more successful than, I don't know, 98% of the companies that started in that time. And
so that's great, actually. Yeah, one led to the other journey, actually. So now you are like president at Data Quality Solutions. So that's a great journey you started with. So do you want to elaborate more on that part?
I mean, let me say the other thing I learned. I think that when I started, I was pretty convinced that data quality was a technical problem. Right? You know, that it had something to do with relational databases or something like that. And gradually we learned that it was a management problem as well. Right? I mean, relatively mundane technical solutions with great management will produce great results. But great technical solutions with poor management or mundane management will not produce results. And so gradually I've become much more of a management consultant and really an advisor. Right. So, you know, a lot of consultants spend a lot of time with companies. It's, you know, I spend 2 or 3 days a month with them, kind of thing. And once again, I mean, the best part for me has just been the terrific people that I've run into and in financial services who wanted to improve their team's work, and the oil and gas business and the retail business. and so forth, right? The people go into data quality. I mean, they're really good people. So.
Yeah, so definitely you chosen the right path. Actually, I feel like because right now, even though people are talking a lot more about this data science, machine learning, and AI, a lot more comes to the data quality. Actually, you have to spend more than 70 to 80% effort to have the quality of a data, and then after you can say that okay, you will learn, like train your machine. So that is definitely good area to be in.
Yeah,
Moving.
let me say something about that. I mean, I think this is really important. And okay, so I don't know, for up to say 4 or 5 years ago, I was dismissive of AI.
Mhm.
And the reason I was we saw the first version of it, or I saw the first version in the early 80s. And people told me, well, that wasn't the first version. The first version was in the 70s or whatever it was. And AI would pop up, right? Would pop
Mhm.
up sort of 8 or 10 year intervals, and it never went anywhere. Okay. And so I decided, I would ignore it, kind of thing. And then one day I was having a conversation with a colleague named Alex Borick, and
Mhm.
Alex is now he's now at Volkswagen, and we got to talking about it, and he said, Tom, you can't ignore it. And I pushed back really hard, and I said, well, why is that, Alex? And I said, what's different? And he said, well, it's not really the algorithms. He said, but now we have computing power,
Mhm.
and now we have lots and lots of data, right? Kind of thing. And it's kind of like, who knew it would take a million pictures of cats to train
Yeah.
an algorithm, right? In the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And so now that data is available, and it's in the cloud, and people source it and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
he said, Tom, I'm worried about quality, but I really appreciate it if you would think about this, right? And so I respect Alex a lot, and so I decided to do it, and it was kind of hard to figure it out. I mean, I've been around data quality a long time, and most things, in 2 or 3 days, I figured it out. But this took me a lot longer, and then one day I woke up, and it's, this is scary. This is really, shut down the entire electric grid in 30 minutes. Scary. And so we have been really, trying to raise the alarm about that. Thank goodness for Harvard Business Review. We got a great article in there,
Mhm.
I don't know, a couple years ago, called "If Your Data's Bad, Your Machine Learning Tools Are Useless." And what it lays out is all the problems. And you mentioned one, like, if the data's bad, well, how do you
Yeah.
train the algorithm? But,
Yeah.
but, but then the next thing is, okay, so you got a good algorithm, but now you turn it loose and you start putting new bad data into it.
Mhm.
You still get bad results, right? So it's not enough to get good data to train the algorithm. You got to get good data. You got to get good data going forward. And so in this respect, I mean, the standards for data quality and machine learning are way higher than in anything else we've done. So I'm so glad that Alex raised that point, and I'm glad you asked me about that. If you're listening and you're worrying, you're doing something with machine learning or artificial intelligence, focus first on the data.
Yeah. Yes. So thank you so much for sharing. Moving towards your like area of expertise, which is data quality.
Right.
What are the measures of data quality? What metric we use, or how do we define the quality of the data, like high quality data or the low quality data?
Yeah, so I mean, here's the way I like to think about that. I mean, in quality, there's this concept called a customer, right? And a customer is some other people may want to use the word stakeholder, but I mean, I kind of prefer the term customer. But a customer is somebody who uses the data.
Mm-hmm.
And those people could be people who are simply, I have a little fictitious company I use sometime called Upscale Sweater. right? And so people in upscale sweater company use data to take orders from people who want to buy sweaters and deliver those sweaters. And
Mhm.
so there's customers who are just using the data for operations, right? And then they have people who may be aggregating the data and using it to make a decision. How many sweaters should we order to stock this store? Kind of thing, and then planning purposes and more and more, this analytics, right? So okay, well, what is our volume likely to be in 5 years?
Mhm.
And on that basis, should we be building a new factory? Should we be outsourcing? Very, very, difficult problems. And so they start in quality with this concept of a customer, and then it's the data is of high quality if it meets the customer's needs.
Mhm.
Okay. And which is very interesting because one set of data can be just great for something you're doing and horrible for what I'm doing. um, and um, and so to me, quality is a customer
Mhm.
driven concept. Now we can separate it, and loosely there's two dimensions of that, and that is do you have the right data, right? To sell the sweater or to make the decision or whatever,
Mhm.
and then is the data right? And so it says the address is 10 Main Street, Anytown, USA. Is it really 10 Main Street? All right. And so loosely, quality and something loosely, I mean, most of the time it
Mhm.
comes down to these two kinds of things. And people jump on, is the data right? Nobody ever says, no, I don't need the data to be accurate, kind of thing. So usually things start there.
Mhm. Yeah. So again, moving to that actually is more over like, how do we achieve the uniformity, like about the data formats, like when we have like a multiple data formats, how we can achieve the uniformity across.
You mean like how can we get everyone to
Yeah,
use this?
we have like a different data formats within the organization, how we can achieve that.
Well, so look, I mean, you have two problems. You sort of have the going forward problem,
Mhm.
and then you have the data you've already created,
Mhm.
kind of thing. And the only way you're going to solve the going forward problem is you're going to start with a customer, right? The customer demands that we have things in this way, right? And set up some standards and then communicate it to people who are creating the data and get them to agree to put the data in those standards. And by the way, it's not just formats. It
Yeah.
could be, we're using English units or
Yes.
metric units,
Mhm.
right? Kind of thing. And so so that's one aspect of the problem. I mean, the other aspect of the problem is this old transform, right? And transform, it's okay, well, this person used feet and inches and this person used meters, and so going to the historical data, I mean, you
Mhm.
just got to figure out what those relationships are. And it's really, really tedious work. So there's this whole
Mhm.
family of work in data called ETL, extract. I think it's called extract, transform, load,
Mhm.
right? But it's also interesting within a company, right? That you're doing all this transformation. There's something a little. Well, you failed to architect properly in the first place, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with sitting down and saying, okay, well, and for official work in this company, we're going to use metric units, right? And companies have not done that well. They've not invested, right, in getting those simple standards um, around their data that they should.
Mhm. Yeah. So when we see about this data cleaning, we do the encryption of the data. So how do you see, is it an advantage or disadvantage when we encrypt the data for
Well,
data?
it depends on why you're doing it.
Uh,
There's certain times that you must encrypt the data.
mhm,
So look, I mean, people have expectations of privacy, and there are certain analyses that you must you simply should not do,
mhm,
right? Unless the data is encrypted. There's times when you should be worried about the data being stolen and keeping it secure, and encryption is just a good part of that. Um, I mean, again, it comes back to this notion of a sort of a customer, and in the customer's eyes, what's really required, uh, kind of thing. So, um, again, I mean, encryption it's not easy,
mhm,
right? And any I don't know. I mean, so, you say we're going to convert feet to meters, and that ought to be easy, but people make mistakes doing that all the time. Um, there's a famous story in data quality about a Martian lander that was crashed because one team used English units and another used metric units, and the conversion didn't go right.
mhm. Okay. And then what is like the nowadays, like people talk a lot about cost of the bad data, right? So what does the bad data cost?
Okay, that's a really important question,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know. 10 or 15 years ago, we developed this thing we call the rule of 10,
Mhm,
and it goes this way. I use a bone as a generic unit of currency. So a bone could be $1, or a euro, or a shekel, or right, whatever it is, kind of thing, or a loonie, right, a Canadian dollar. But if it cost one bone to complete a simple operation when the data is perfect, then it costs 10 bones to complete that same unit of work when the data is bad. And so this is the part where we've sort of in these operations we've been able to get a some decent estimates. And so there, sort of, okay, well, get the data quality statistic, apply the rule of 10, and you get an estimate of the quality.
mhm,
We've also done some work to try to collect a database of
mhm,
how good is the data, and sort of 55% is about the average kind of thing. There's some technical stuff in that which we won't go into, but so basically what it's saying in a lot of basic work,
mhm,
45% of the time the data is not perfect.
mhm,
And then you have this multiplier of 10 on what it costs, and so the costs are enormous. And so I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, IBM published a statistic that it cost the U.S. economy $3 trillion a year. 3 trillion, right? That
mhm.
T word, right? And
Yeah.
um, right, and then some other people, some James Price and others in Australia have done some work, and on a couple of years ago we synthesized this, and it all kind of held together. The rule of 10, right?
Mhm,
The $3 trillion, and we sort of estimated as a starting point 20% of revenue, in a typical company. Now let me say this. I mean, we don't know how to put a cost on a bad decision,
mhm.
or a bad algorithm, or things that stretch beyond. And so and I also, by the way, I don't want to say, I don't want to be, well, it's 3 trillion plus or minus 100 billion, right?
Yeah.
But it is it, and similarly with the 20%. I mean,
Mm,
companies vary, but it is a huge number. And in fact, I mean, the biggest opportunity that I know of to improve company performance, um, and probably government performance
Mm-hmm.
is to improve data quality.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you feel like? Which kind of a projects will get more impacted because of this data quality?
Will be more impacted.
Yeah, with the data quality issue.
Well, I mean, look, there's impact every day on basic operations. There's the one thing that people in data science and analytics forget, right? They think the data is just there for them to play with,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually there to deliver sweaters to customers, right? It's how we do work. We use data to do work, and so so you don't really think of that as a project. That's just the ongoing business of the company, the money making ongoing business
Mm-hmm.
of the company. But I mean, nobody should trust the data, and they shouldn't trust it for anything. And so what's the impact on that on somebody's analytic project or somebody's AI project? I mean, so they have to, at the very least, they have to invest an enormous amount of money cleaning up data. And the standard, I mean, again, the more impactful the algorithm or the decision, the more time has to be spent, right? Doing that cleanup.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely, it is a time-consuming thing. And when we look about this, like achieving the data quality within the organizations, would you like to share some of the best practices for the organizations?
I think that, yeah. I look. I mean, I think the first thing is you have to admit you have a problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? Kind of thing. But the other thing is, here's what I've observed: is the root causes of most data quality issues are stunningly simple.
Okay.
Okay, let me give you an example. I mean, this is kind of one that I think is so instructive, but it takes place in a health clinic,
Mm-hmm.
and the people in the health clinic noticed that whenever they had to track down a patient to maybe change his or her medication or reschedule an appointment, get more tests, a lot of times it was a pain in the neck. Right, and they didn't know how much time they wasted or what was going on, and how much it cost or anything like that. They just knew it was a pain in the neck.
Mm-hmm.
So one day they did this thing we call the Friday afternoon measurements. I laid out a bunch of data and stuff like that, and they found out that 46% of the reach numbers were obviously wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so no wonder you were having trouble, right, reaching people. And so, so they just changed the process. You come into the clinic, and say, oh, good to see you again, Ms. Lamb. What's your cell phone number? And they got the cell phone number correct right there at the very start. Okay. And I don't know. I mean, I see this over and over and over again, right? There's just these simple, like if you dive in, right, you find these sort of, I don't want to say silly, but basic root causes that people can eliminate, right, quickly with no added resources or budget.
Mm-hmm.
Now at a slightly higher level, the what you need to make this happen is all of us every day. So we don't think about this enough, but we do two things. One, we are customers of data that people give us to do our work, and then we create further data. Okay, and so like in this health clinic. Well, who was insisting that the reach number be correct? So, well, nobody was. Right. And so part of what was going on was people who needed that, stepping into that role.
Mm-hmm.
I need this number to be correct. Here's why I need it to be correct. And then getting it right at the point of creation, right there at the point where people check into into the clinic, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where responsibility for getting that
Mm-hmm.
all right. And so these two simple roles, creator and customer, right? The getting these roles in place. Once you do that, quality goes, up very, very quickly. And so that's been a recurring theme, right?
Yep.
And obviously you have to put in metrics
Mm,
and you have to make the improvements, but like from an organizational perspective,
mm,
right? And it's by the way, I mean, this is one of these things I pointed out all the time, that well, you're simultaneously a customer and a creator, and most people would, I never thought about it that way, but so I mean, it's once it's they see it, then they know, and then they can step into the roles. It's,
mm.
we train a lot of people up with sort of like 1 or 2 days of quality training, and really good things happen. Now, of course, by the way, I mean, the leadership is so important,
Yes.
right? So, while any team can do this, if you want it to happen across an entire organization, senior
Yeah.
leaders have to be insisting that it do so.
So, yeah, it's very insightful actually. So when we talk about this, how do we trade off between the scale and the accuracy?
I'm sorry, how do you do this?
How do you trade off between the scale of the data quality and the accuracy?
The scale of the data quality?
So how do we differentiate that? Like,
Um, well, I mean, sort of again, I mean, this is all driven by customers, right? And there's things that they define what the accuracy requirements will be, and they also, so I mean, it's a part of your question, I assume, is, well, how many decimal places do I need, right? Okay, so I was thinking in terms of dollars, for the CFO, producing a 10K, so within $1,000 is probably okay, right? But for somebody who's making payment on a purchase order, it has to be penny perfect kind of thing. And so once again, I mean, the quality is driven by what the customer who's using the data, what they need that for.
yeah. So thank you so much for sharing. Actually, the way you are talking, it truly shows your interest and the passion. And moving to one more question in the data quality space, like there are lots of tools coming in now.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see the data visualization tool as the assessment for the data quality? Do you feel it is like good to have the data visualization tools to assess your data quality, or it is always better to go for the other algorithmic approach? Like,
Well, so look, I mean, the simple answer to that, I mean, nothing is ever uniformly better than anything.
mhm,
Okay. Well, I'm sorry if this answer is long-winded. I think too many people today are sort of enamored of the computer, and and
mhm,
and they see things through the computer, and they don't really see them.
mhm,
Okay, and visualization, particularly when you take things out of the computer, right, or you draw a picture, I mean, is just so helpful.
mhm,
Okay, the first measurement we ask people to make, we ask them to make a Friday afternoon. Okay, and whatever your department does, just take the data, the most important data you need to do that, right? So if you sign up customers, what data does it take to sign up customers? You sequence genes, what does that take? You check people into the health clinic that we talked about, and the first visualize. So I asked them to print out, a 100 by 15 matrix, right, and then sit around, put it on a big piece of paper, and get in a conference room, and it's called the Friday afternoon measurement. You do it on Friday afternoon, right? So, but give everybody a red pen, right, and just circle the errors, right, and mark them up, kind of thing. And the human eye, particularly people who know what's going on, is remarkably good at spotting errors, right? The alternative is sort of develop a bunch of business rules on what can be valid. I mean, that is so much harder. All right, and now the computer can do things at scale, but the human eye is really good at detecting errors. Doesn't mean it detects everything, right? But it turns out that and then so the next thing is we'll draw pictures
Mm-hmm.
and find outliers. Well, right? I mean, and we're sort of talking more about what an analyst is doing, or a data scientist, and you have to do things to understand what is going on in the data. You have to understand how the data is related to what's going on in the real world that's creating the data. And when you see, okay, well, we've got this nice concentration of stuff, and then boop, 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 boop over here, you got to ask about that, right? One of the things that one of the guys I thought was really clever was John Tukey, right? And John pointed out that sometimes here's the stuff you really want to know, right? Here's the anomalies where the interesting stuff to discover is. So I am a big believer in pictures. I hope I don't betray how old school I am, but I always draw my first pictures by hand, right? And I put them on graph paper, and it's not, I don't get better pictures that way, but I get a better feel for the data. And so visualize, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is visualization is important, not just in its own right, but it helps people understand what's really going on.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And then moving to the next question, like a couple of weeks back, I did one podcast with one guest, like in the data governance. So how data governance is related to the data quality and achieve, helps to improve the data quality. Do you like to share anything about
Look, there's a lot of different definitions of data governance running around. Okay, and a lot of people say it's sort of like data governance is the management approach for data quality. I've been very disappointed in what I've seen people who apply data governance to data quality. All right, and I think the reason is this is so when we talked about the customers and creators. Right. It's almost like those are the important things happening in data quality, right? And in governance, you try to put too many try to put the effort in the middle, right? And in data quality, the effort belongs on the edges, right? So I'm not a big fan of that sort of bureaucracy that comes with data governance. Data quality properly managed is done here, right? Too much data governance doesn't focus on that. And I don't know, somebody was telling me too, the other day that they had a client who doesn't like the term data governance. It's too much like control. Right? It's too much like being given a curfew when you're a teenager and stuff like that. So, I don't know. I am cautious about
that. Okay. That's fine actually. So thank you for sharing. Moving towards the you are author of like bunch of books. You
Right.
do the data quality books. In the which is data quality field guide, then data quality information age, data driven profiting from most important assets, and data quality management and technology.
Right.
So it's a huge thing. Would you like to share more about those books and you being an author?
So yeah, let me say one thing about me being an author. I got really lucky. I got really lucky in about 1995. I think I told you that I was. I think I told you that we were gradually learning that data quality wasn't so much a technical problem as a management problem. And so I sent off. I wrote my first article for a management journal, and I sent it off to Sloan Management Review. And a couple of weeks later, I got a call back from from the editor, and she, she said, Tom, there's some really interesting ideas in here. It's a shame you can't write. Okay.
Oh.
And I mean, it was crestfallen, but then what she did, and by the way, I mean, this woman changed my life, and I'm not sure she'd like to be cited.
Something happened for better.
Yeah, I'm not sure she'd like to be cited, so I'm not going to name her today. But in any event, I mean, she showed me a few simple ways to write better, and sort of got me thinking much more about communication, and eventually I came to realize that I didn't really understand things until I could communicate them in a simple way, right? Now, as for the sequence of my books, I mean, so one line of the book was we started out and we were just trying to figure out what to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do the work? And remember, I was at Bell Labs. You write up when you learn, sort of how to do the work, and then so my first book or two was on that, right? And then as we stepped up to the management level, it was well, what are middle managers doing? And so, how do you manage data coming in from outside the organization, creation? And so that was kind of like a middle management book. And then 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote a book called Getting in Front on Data, Who Does What? Oh. And that book was to try to answer the question of who, right? And so if there's kind of like, how, what, kind of like, this was the who kind of thing. And it was really call out customers and creators and not go into detail about how to do the work, but lay out as best I understood the kind of organization you had to put in place so that you could do data quality at scale across an entire organization, kind of thing. And so that was one string of my books. The other book you mentioned, data-driven, profiting from your most important business assets. So that book, this concept called, manage data as assets, right? Kind of, began to develop, I'm going to say in, I don't know, 2004, 2005 kind of thing. And I had a conversation, with one day with a guy named Luang Yankee, who's at Air Energy. And he said, Tom, that is a great buzz line. What exactly does it mean? Kind of thing. And so that book, I did that book with Harvard Business School Press, and it was really, terrific. And we tried to explore what it meant to manage something as an asset. And so that's really, I mean, I'm very proud of that book.
Yeah, this is like a big achievement actually, and I felt like you have like a very good reviews everywhere on the publishing side. So congratulations on that, and I would definitely like to read all those books actually.
Yeah.
So,
actually, by the way, I wrote one more. I mean, and let me just quickly mention it. And this one's called The Real Work of Data Science, and this stemmed from a fellow by the name of Ron Kennett reaching out to me. He's a distinguished Israeli statistician. And we got to talking about when we were successful and when we weren't. And we recognized the time we were successful had less to do with how good the technical work was, but things like, well, did the decision maker trust us? And did we state the problem correctly? And things like that. And so we decided to put our head together and summarize this. It was a very skinny volume, right? But this one was aimed at really aspiring data scientists, and to try to get them out from their computers and into these, to these other things. So anyway.
Yeah, that's great actually. So I came across your website, elearning.com, elearningcurve.com actually. So would you like to tell more about it to the audience?
But eLearning Curve is not my website.
Yeah, it is like there are a bunch of good people, like lots of leaders came together, and
So yeah, so look, I mean, I'm not current on e-learning. So e-learning was set up by a fellow by the name of Arkady Medanchik,
Mm-hmm.
and Arkady is, I mean, he's a really smart guy, and he had this idea that he wanted to put together a bunch of courses that would help people, in the data space.
Mm-hmm.
And so I contributed a course or two courses, but he's got a lot of good stuff out there. So um, okay, sorry, I'm not current on what Arcady's up to.
Okay, no worries. So, moving to the leadership skills, actually, what do you think is important for any person to take the leadership or lead the area that person is passionate about?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, for me, look, I try to just be who I am, and I try to be as transparent as I can. I try to be a good listener.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I try to give credit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Gosh, I mean, I feel like I've learned from so many people, along the way. And I mean, and in some respects, I mean, I couldn't even name them all. Um, but there was a professor in when I was in graduate school who just treated everyone so well. And these graduate students aren't always treated well. And I mean, he just became my role model there. And I had mentors who kind of said, well, in this situation, here's how you want to, how you want to do things. I feel really lucky, and so I don't know. I mean, look. What I'm trying to do is I am trying in especially in the data quality space. I am doing my best to get the stories, get the messages to the audiences where I think they will do the most good. And I'm trying to get those messages to managers and senior managers and leaders about how the opportunity there. And I am trying to encourage regular people,
Mm-hmm.
right? That they have a future in data. They can make data quality improvements, and gosh, it's gonna be fun. Um,
Yeah, for sure, actually. And I just felt like, you are on the right, um, in the like critical kind of a skill set area where people need that skill right now at the moment, and which is like a high in demand. So moving towards like, leadership style, just to add to it, like, would you like to elaborate on your leadership style or any leader that you follow? You already mentioned that you came across good people and you always like, been lucky, but what is your leadership style?
so I mean, I guess day in and day out, I don't think of myself in
Mm-hmm.
that way, but let me make something that I found really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I went to charm school in middle manager school in
Mm-hmm.
AT&T, and the person told this really interesting gave this really interesting example. They started with two circles, and one circle was your span of control,
Mm-hmm.
and the other circle was your span of influence,
Mm-hmm.
right? And part of the lesson was, well, what do you want? How do you want these circles to relate to one? Okay. And so, like there's people who want to have absolute control, but only over a few things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, control and their interests aren't very big, and so their influence, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be very big. And then there's other people who want to, have control over like a whole factory kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? That kind of thing. And they don't think about influence beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
at all. But for me, what I recognized was, my ideal would be my control would be a dot,
Mm-hmm.
right, barely visible, and my influence would be as big as it could possibly be. And so so that's how I think about think about things, and the way I work is I try to be more influential,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to be more influential in places that will
And that shows actually you are more wise as well. So thank you so much for sharing this. And moving to the end of this podcast, the last question is, any advice or tips would you like to give to the students or professionals who are looking to build their career in this data field?
Oh, so look, I mean, I think if you're going to build a career in the data field, you're lucky, right? I mean, now's the time to be in the data field, but I have the following worry, and
Mm-hmm.
the failure rate of data science projects is too high, I can't prove this, but my sense is that too many data scientists, particularly when you get right out of school,
Mm-hmm.
you want to sit at your terminal and analyze the data,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it is tempting to do that instead of going out and building your network and working with people and gaining the trust of decision makers and so forth. So I would encourage people to measure your impact not by how clever your analysis was,
Mm-hmm.
but how much good you did for your company or your company's customers, right? And so how much of it was really used, right? A very clever analysis that is never used, that it's too clever for people to understand, is not near as valuable as a mundane one
Mm-hmm.
that tens or hundreds of people benefit from. And so look, if in the data space, I mean, it is easy right now to sort of carve out a niche sitting at your computer, but
Mm-hmm.
bigger than that, right? Think about impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is really very wise advice, and I feel like I had got so many insights about how the data world is working. So thank you so much for being guest on my podcast and all your time and providing your advices as well as your experiences, sharing the experience. You have a lot more you have achieved. So I completely got inspired talking to you, and definitely I feel that audience will like it as well. So thank you so much for all your time.
Well, thank you, Lisha, and thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for this discussion, and good luck to you, and good luck to your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure, and I will definitely stay connected. Also, I will provide your details in this post as well when I publish this episode, so that people who would like to connect with you directly, they can connect and ask the questions if they have any around the data.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hope all of you enjoy this episode, and until we meet, happy leading. Let's lead together. Bye.
Bye bye.